No.
Sorry, you had.
Yeah, I do. So I digitize this mainly so that I can topic search.
Yep, absolutely.
Are you digitizing this at any point?
I am not. And I used to. You know,
So
I had a ridiculous Excel, document that had, at the time I was tracking like my performance on the fast drill, right?
Yeah.
And so I could reference every single one of them. There's nothing wrong with digitizing it to make it a little easier for you to reference it, but I know me, right? And me says I'm going to write that shit in my logbook and I'm going to completely forget to go head back and digitize it, and I won't do that. And then when I want to reference it, I got to then transcribe everything back into that, and I just won't do that. It's
So
overly complicated for me.
I'd like to both kind of touch this a little bit. So if I go into this is just phone notes, right? If I search my phone notes for the word transitions,
Yeah.
I can come up with every hit on a time I wrote down something about transitions.
Mm-hmm.
So
Sure.
are you guys, if you're on the range, you're doing a thing, and you feel like, man, I was sluggish from 15 to 25 in transition, are you then flipping back through the notebook to look at previous instances?
Not right there in that case. No, I'm not.
You're not doing that.
I'm not in that particular case. I'm
I
not.
thought I might get a different answer. So you're doing it.
Yeah.
So you're flipping through notebook until you find.
So like I said, right, I will look at typically the last time I did that exercise, right, or the last time I worked that, or maybe the last couple times I worked that, and I'm only looking at that to get an idea of where I should be. I may not do that before I shoot it. I may do it.
So I have a problem. I've decided that this upcoming practice session is going to be about the fact that I'm disrespecting the 15-yard target and I'm treating it like the 7.
Yep.
I know, because I'm a world-class firearms trainer guy named AJ Zito, that this is my problem.
Uh-huh.
Right? And are you then going back through the log going, well, shit, you know what? This has become a pattern for me. I've written down disrespected the 15-yard target 10 times in the last 3 months or something, something of that sort.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
You're just doing that analog.
Yeah,
Okay.
Totally. That's why I make it as simple as I can.
But that's a great point. So if you're over dataing it, then
yeah.
I guess if you type it in
Aaron.
transitions, you might put something 2 years
And that's the problem, right? I start seeing all the transitional data.
and then you get an overload.
Exactly. Because at that point, right, for most of us, right, if we're truly making progress, you should not be the same shooter today that you were 6 months ago. So that information from 6 months ago, right, for the rest of us, for other than Tim Herron's, right, when we're trying to make progress, right, we shouldn't really be the same shooter 6 months later if we're actually doing the work, right? We should be seeing improvements.
Yeah.
Or we should be seeing consistency, right? So like I would venture to say if I went back through Tim's logbook, what I would be seeing is consistency. Yep, this is what he shoots those in. This is what it looks like over and over and over and over again. There's some consistency, especially if all of a sudden one day, well, I've got it over and over and over again, but this one day, Tim done lost his mind. What's different about this day?
Yeah.
That would be important information for me.
New gun, new springs.
Exactly.
Different holster,
well, this is a
different
completely
equipment.
different gun. Well,
Holy
that makes
shit.
a lot of sense.
It was in the middle of November, and there happened to be a freak snowstorm, and I was out there freezing my ass off trying to do the same thing that I would
talking about the class we're about to do.
that I would typically do in June when it's bright, sunny, and 92 degrees outside.
Or you got people
Aaron.
sending you espresso beans.
Right, exactly. Right.
In
Go ahead.
today's day and age, I love the analog format. There's so much data out there that there's an actual new career now called data science. There's actually people that are going to school, getting PhDs in data science. And they boiled down some interesting topics that you guys are covering today that might make sense to some people. One of them is the concept of observability.
Sure.
Observability is how do you take all of this data and float just what's in front of your face to something that's actionable. And that's what you've done.
Correct.
It's not a software program, but you've made a dashboard. This is your dashboard for that training section. Everything on there means I need to, there's something on that means I need to practice something more or I don't need to, right?
Correct.
And you're doing the same thing. You're saying I've got to average and I'm going to track stuff. But to your point over there, what you're talking about is how do you go back to a transition from 2 years ago we'll call that root cause analysis, or RCAs, right? How do I get a root cause and why I decided to have a shitty day? Or should you go back 2 years to look at
Right.
a transition? Or what we talked about yesterday is what's your rolling average? What are you looking at? So you have to be able to apply a process on top of the data in a format that works for you.
The rolling average for me works much better,
Right.
because then it becomes less about what's in the earliest portion of my book that
Right.
might be 9-10 months ago.
Which the digitization has a harder time with.
Right.
Because you have so much data points. Is it really relevant to my performance today? So you have to take all these concepts and twist it and come up with a system that works for you. And you guys are showing us what system works for us. But I would say that after you use your system, each one of us are going to tweak it a little bit.
Sure.
1,000%.
That's the hope.
And you should.
That's
But
the hope.
You should have a process. This is a scientific method. What you guys are teaching here is no different than an engineering class or biology or chemistry. You are trying the scientific principles of I have a theory. I'm going to go test that theory. I'm going to record results, and then my next test, I'm now going to apply the results or change something different in the experiment, the control, and I'm going to make something changing.
Yes.
Correct.
Interesting
And that's the
stuff.
thing, guys. I'm not saying
Thank you for
don't
thinking corporate.
For those corporate people, yes.
I'm not saying don't track digitally. If that works for Kent and that he's having success with
Sure.
that, I would say 1,000% double down on that shit. Because if that makes sense to you, it's going to be way better than anything I tell you to do.
I was just
Because
more
it's
interested
working.
in if you were going back and how
Yeah.
far.
Yeah, not that
Not
far.
that far.
Ash.
When you deal with something that crops up, you think it's an issue, like say you go back to your rolling average, and then you kind of address it, it seems to go away, and then it comes back again. Like, so, you know what I mean? And then you address it, you train with that, you seem to temporarily sort of solve it, for lack of a better word. You know what I mean? It doesn't become an issue in your training or in your matches, and then you catch yourself doing it again.
Oh my God. Welcome to the rest of your life as a shooter.
No, I'm just.
I'm
yeah,
seriously.
So, yeah, 'cause
There
I'm
are
like,
times when you feel like I
do
am
stuff
making
like that a
progress,
lot.
and there's going to be other times where you feel like you are bashing your head against a concrete wall.
So
Seriously, it happens.
So let me-
He said to me, he goes,
No, because
"Then
we're
you're
talking about
practicing it wrong."
consistency and patterns
That could be.
and that kind of a thing.
But here's the thing, right? Let me give you a perfect example. When you guys were brand new shooters, brand new, did you have trouble pressing a trigger correctly?
Yes.
100%.
Now you're all much more beta shooters. Do you still have problems pressing the trigger correctly?
Yes.
Is it fewer and farther between? Right? Are you
But
more
it's still
consistent
there.
on the side of better trigger pressers, or are you further on the side of worse trigger pressers? You've seen progression, but all too often we measure progression simply by the number, right? Like, oh no, it's got to be better today than yesterday, instead of looking at overall progression being a measurement of consistency. Am I 70% am I 70% positive trigger presser, whereas 6 months ago I was only a 40% positive trigger presser? But it was a 60% time that I was screwing it up. Now it's 50-50. Now it's 60-40. Now it's 70-30 the other direction. Instead of always looking at it as like, no, I need to be 100% to this number, and then, okay, now it's time to move the goalpost, right? Stop thinking about moving the goalpost to just what is the next number I need to achieve. Start looking at, okay, how do I continue to kick those field goals through that same goalpost over and over and over again without fail. Without fail. And this goes to any other sport, right? I love reading about like top level athletes in just about any sport, right? There's a big deal about like, I can't remember where I read it at, but Michael Jordan, back in the day, right? In the early 80s, mid 80s, when he was playing for North Carolina, and then of course got picked up by the Bulls, right? He was not a first round draft pick either. But the thing about it was his practice, like almost a symptom of Tourette's for many people. And Kobe Bryant, exact same way. I'm going to stand here on the free throw line, and I'm not allowing myself to move anywhere else on the key until I put 10 in the basket in succession. If you got to 8 and you missed one, you go all the way back to the beginning until you knock out 10. And 10 only gives you then permission to move to the left side of the free throw line, then to the right side of the free throw line, down to the bottom of the key, then up to the top, right? So you figure by the time that he got done with a particular practice session, that dude had been in the gym, right, for probably 6 hours just shooting an individual ball. Then it got so bad, like with Kobe, the big thing was not just did I make the basket, did they sound the same? Did the ball go through the hoop and through the net, making the same swish every single time? Or did the ball go gunk swish nope, I fucked that up. I got to go back and do it all over again. Like that is a method of consistency that obviously I'd like to say I'm striving for. Everybody should be striving for. But there's also a point in time where like you could drive yourself insane trying to do that as well.
Exactly. Exactly.
Right. For me, a lot of my practice is not in repetition to try to push progression of a particular skill set. I'm trying to push the consistency of a skill set to a point of I can't screw it up. I can do it 10 out of 10 times. Now and then, or then and only then, would I then, okay, I'm going to change the end goal.
But AJ,